Florida, for kids.
Yeah.
So Florida has been arguably the most enthusiastic state about deporting people. I believe they have been number one in deportations. They formed a whole board to deport people as soon as Trump came in. They really doubled down on rounding people up. There's only one problem. Florida, because of its enormous tourism industry, is unusually dependent on boatloads of cheap immigrant labor. So, where are you going to get cheap labor if you kick out all these immigrants? Well, our friend Ensure Ron had some ideas about that. He expressed on stage with his fellow criminal there, Tom Homan.
In Florida. And I also look, they said when we did E-Verify, we got big resorts, we got all this. They said, oh, you're not going to be able, to hire people or whatever. And one, that hasn't been the case in Florida. Yes, we had people that left because of those rules, but you've also been able to hire other people. And what's wrong with expecting like our young people to be working part-time now? I mean, like that's how it used to be when I was growing up. Why do we say we need to import foreigners, even import them illegally, when teenagers used to work at these resorts? College students should be, all this stuff. It's like you go 30, 40,000 in debt to just take loans, but you're not expected to work at all. So I think the priorities have been jumbled, and I think there's absolutely people that would be able to do. And then even these legal programs, I mean, I'm sorry, these H-1.
Okay, so then he goes on into H-1B visas. But okay, so Ensure Ron is painting this very Norman Rockwell picture of what he has in mind. Kids working part-time, selling the newspapers. But that's already legal. That's already legal. I had a paper route when I was a kid. Do you have a paper route, Keaton?
No, I didn't have a paper route. I worked
I
at
did
Pizza
that.
Hut.
Yeah, no, I delivered the Daily News for a while. So he's making it out that that's what he's talking about. But why would you need to advocate for that? There are already millions of teenagers working part-time jobs all around the country. No, what he's thinking of is something more like this, more along these lines, more along the lines of the third world. Our friend Chris Hedges often says what they do over there they'll eventually do over here, and usually means that in a military context, but it's also true in an economic context. In fact, we used to have the world that Ron DeSantis is so nostalgic for. Looked like this. Before 1938, they passed the Labor Act that set the minimum wage and also set limitations on child labor. But before that, you had kids working in the mines, you had kids working in the factories. Um, so they're trying to bring us back to those halcyon days. Alarm as Florida Republicans move to fill deported workers' jobs with children. With children. So we're going to play a little bit of a CBS report on this.
The Senate bill would remove restrictions on 16 and 17-year-olds, allowing for overnight shifts longer than 8 hours during school days, more than 30 hours during school weeks, and remove mandated meal breaks. It would also lift those restrictions on 14 and 15-year-olds who are homeschooled or attend virtual classes.
This is a parental rights issue, and frankly, we're not talking The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. We're talking about them working at Publix, at Piggly Wiggly.
Okay, so that's really beside the point where you're talking about them working. And the only reason they're not talking about that is because federal law does not allow them to work in dangerous conditions. They certainly would if they could, because if you look at what this law is, very much like the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage is $7.25. Very few states don't mandate a higher than federal minimum wage. They're bringing the Florida laws down to the bare minimum of what Florida law requires with children, right up to the line of what they can get away with. So most states don't go to that bare minimum. They're trying to drag Florida down to the bare minimum. And that would allow them to, if you're homeschooled, if you go to school virtually, no rules. You can work a 40-hour week. You can take a 14-year-old, make them work a full-time job if if they happen to be homeschooled. Overnight shifts. Why would you put in the bill no requirement for meal breaks for kids?
Right.
I mean, just the level of psychopathic evil. Who's this going to impact? What you think the children of the rich are going to be working overnight while they're trying to go through high school? It's one more example of trying to roll back whatever gains workers have made over the last century and bring us back to Gilded Age circumstances, right down to child labor. All right, let's watch a little more of this.
Comes as Florida has about 77 available workers for every 100 open jobs, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But at Paradise Farms in Homestead, farm manager Brendan Sutton does not believe easing restrictions on child labor is the answer.
That's what this bill is designed for, to take advantage of poor people for the benefit of rich people.
Do you see a world where a parent who's undocumented doesn't feel that they can freely go out to work, may want to send their child to do it instead?
Yeah, I mean, you're getting to the crux of the matter. Like, we've been promised this mass deportation, and now the business class is wondering, oh, what are we going to do to replace our cheap labor?
Florida Policy Institute's Alexis Tsoukalis is against the bill.
That's really going to be an unfair choice between school and work, when really we should be keeping these guardrails in place so there's a proper balance.
She says 16 other states are also considering rolling back some protections or have already done so as the debate in Florida continues. Manuel.
Okay. So I was told that part of the whole impetus behind MAGA was that we had enough Americans to work these jobs. So if you got rid of all these immigrants, it was going to improve employment rates and it was going to raise wages. So why does Florida have a labor shortage? They have 100 jobs for every 77 people. What happened? I thought the free market was going to take care of that. Where are all these Americans who want to work, who are moving to Florida to take those jobs? Why do they have to resort to child labor? I feel that's not what I voted for, Keaton.
I said this before
Jill Stein, but
right. I said this before the election. I said this as far back as we've talked about the immigration issue. And, it's not that there's not a legitimate concern about immigration and wages, but I have promised you every step of the way, they can drag every illegal immigrant out of this country. You are not getting a better deal from these people. Do not think that them dragging immigrants out is going to result in the middle class or the working class getting a raise. They are going to find some other way, if not multiple other ways, to stick it in your ass. Automation, downsizing, supply cutting, or child labor. They have a million cards in the deck that they can pull out, none of which are, let's give a raise to Eddie. That's not going to happen. You're not getting that from this crew. And I've been saying that for years now.
Right. So a little of the Guardian article. Unsurprisingly, the proposal has alarmed immigration advocates and watchdog groups concerned about child labor abuses and exploitation. They point out that there is nothing part-time in the language of the companion Senate. You notice how Ensure Ron wanted to make it out like he's standing up for part-time labor, because what they're actually advocating for is grotesque. So he has to make it like he's advocating for something we already have that nobody is arguing against.
Hey, when I was a kid, I used to bottle Coca-Cola for 10 hours with a 10-minute break.
There was actually a local mafia don who needed his enemies enamored, and that was where I got my start in sticking rubber tubes up people's asses. In the language of the companion Senate and House bills currently before lawmakers, which instead will permit unlimited working hours without breaks for 14 and 15-year-olds who are schooled at home or online, and allow employers to require 16 and 17-year-olds to work for more than 6 days in a row. Quote, it's essentially treating teens who have developing bodies and minds like adults, and this will allow employers to schedule them for unlimited hours overnight and without breaks. And this is during the school year, said Alexis Tsoukalis, senior policy analyst at the Florida Policy Institute, an independent research and economic analysis group. The state was singled out in a 2024 report by Governing for Impact and the Economic Policy Institute that recorded a surge in workplace injuries and violations involving minors, some in the agricultural industry, where hazards include exposure to toxic chemicals and dangerous machinery. The report noted a corresponding push in at least 30 mostly Republican controlled states to weaken workplace protections for children and warned the second Trump administration would seek to escalate the rollback. Quote, we've been saying since 2023 that this is a way for them to exploit minors. It was when they passed this large anti-immigrant omnibus, and the same year that they tried to pass the first law gutting child labor protection, said Thomas Kennedy, spokesperson for the Florida Immigrant Coalition. The only short-term answer to workforce shortages has always been net migration, and they'll never go for that because of their politics. So their only answer is to widen the parameters of who can work. And you either go older or you go younger, and they chose to go younger. Kennedy pointed to another Republican bill that progressed this week that would allow employers to pay interns and apprentices less than minimum wage. Quote, to recap, they made the state hostile to immigrants. They deported a bunch of people or scared people into not coming or moving out of the state. They exacerbated worker shortages, so now they're trying to gut child labor protection standards while at the same time passing a law that would allow them to classify these children and other workers as interns, he said. It's insane, right? Now, okay, as Keaton pointed out, we have always been willing to say there are legitimate issues with unrestrained immigration. I have always felt that the purpose of it was to suppress wages and to destabilize the labor market. But that's not really what Republicans care about. They want cheap labor. They want to keep the cost of labor down. What you've been told, apparently, I mean, look at those Florida figures. They got 100 jobs for every 77 people. So that kind of undermines the idea that, well, there are all these jobs that would be taken by Americans if you didn't have these immigrants. So at that point, you've really just got a politics that's built on racism as charged, right? Well, why else would you want to get rid of these people if you can't actually fill the jobs with Americans? It's been sold as that. We'll fill these jobs with Americans. Not only do they clearly, based on the fact that you've got 30 Republican states trying to loosen child labor laws, they know they don't have enough Americans who are actually going to fill these jobs. So what else is it other than to distract the population with racial animus and blaming somebody further down the economic ladder from you for your own problems? As Keaton pointed out, what do you think, they want to give you higher wages?
Right. You think
they don't want to
yeah.
give you higher wages. So how do they get around it? All right, now they get rid of these immigrants. They don't want adult American citizens taking these jobs, and then you're going to have universal employment, and they're going to have to start to raise wages to compete for labor. So what do? Well, let's get children. This is what scum these people are. Look, to get the rights, what's left of them that you have today, that was generations of workers who were willing to get their heads cracked by the Pinkertons. Right. That was who were really willing. James, who's come on the show a few times, man, his father used to get hired to get beaten up on the picket line. That was a job to be willing to take the beating from the Pinkertons. That's what it took to get what you have now. And a lot of it's already gone. What remains of it, like child labor laws, that was fought for. Now they are trying to get rid of it. And all of this, these very macho Michael Bay videos of people being shipped to El Salvador, It's just a distraction from their real agenda. I keep saying this, and I think within a year, most people are going to realize this. They're trying to kill you. They are trying to kill you. They have no interest in empowering you. They have no interest in restoring some better way of life, some golden age of American capitalism. They have no interest in that. They are using your support. They're using your votes. They're using your political consent to build a feudal society where a lot of labor can actually be automated. They don't need as many of you. They can rule that system. They'll use Palantir and their Lavender AI system to continue to build out a surveillance state. They'll crush the courts that are the only check on their power in order to be able to arrest anyone who dissents under the premise of them being terrorists. And if you drop dead from lack of health care or starvation, that's why it's the Scrooge thing. Let them get about the business of dying to cut down the surplus population. That's how they see you. Your surplus population. Their own followers, they have nothing but contempt. They want you dead.
Yeah, they and well, look, I mean, this is evidenced, I think, in large part by the messaging which you notice around immigration, and this is another thing I told you was going to happen. All of the messaging around immigration is going to be about crime and safety, right? They're not going to say it's about racism. They're going to say it's about crime and safety. We're getting these people out to keep you safe. That's exactly what they're saying now, insisting everybody who they're removing is a gang member and a violent threat, even though there are multiple instances of people who are no such thing being sent to these hellhole prisons anyway. That is evidence of what you're talking about. They are not proposing a better deal for the working class or for the middle class even. They're not even proposing that. They're just saying this is a safety issue. We have to rid our streets of these dangerous people. That's how they get people on board with it, because empowering working people is just not what they're interested in. It's plainly not what they want.
Of course not. Why
they're
would they
going to
want
come
to do
up with
that?
every other thing, every reason they can to not do that. And, you know, as you said, it's going to be poor and working class people whose kids have to work the 6 days in a row with limited breaks and blah, blah, blah. And how do they get them to go along with that? You show them somebody else who has it worse and who deserves to have it worse. And then you say, well, yeah, my kid's got to work 6 days in a row so that we can have a life because we're not those freeloading commies on the left and we're not like those immigrants who come up here asking for a handout. Meanwhile, what happens? Your quality of life degrades and degrades and degrades, and you become more and more attached to it. Attachment to your own suffering. That is a great American value. Megan Day said that when
You're
I
the horse
interviewed
and
her.
animal farm.
Yeah, exactly. Very attached to your own suffering. You really define yourself in those terms, and the result is just going one way the wrong way. And they'll come up with every issue they can to distract you from that. That's what a lot of the culture wars are about. That's what this immigration thing is about now. It's just a theater of pain. That's all it is.
Please clap.